What I hate about fascists is not that they're right-wing or nationalist. What I hate about fascists is that they're people who are rebelling against the establishment for the wrong reasons. The thing is that a lot of fascists and reactionaries, sadly, tragically, for somebody like me, start out saying a bunch of stuff that's actually true. I'm a conspiracy theorist. But the thing is that a lot of fascists try to hijack conspiracy theorists and truther circles, even though a lot of the people who are in the truther circles, a lot of the people who would listen to David Icke, for instance, and, I would take him with a grain of salt too, because he's a human, is that it's a mix of things, and a lot of it is as much New Age conspiracism as it would be right-wing or religious patriots, and hopefully those people balance each other out. Hopefully the hippies will balance out the Alex Jones watchers to become, a good rebel alliance. But here's the thing that happens with the Illuminati, the cabal, the globalists, whatever you want to call it, international transorganized crime, the overlords, the oligarchs. We don't know exactly what they are, and the thing is, everybody's take on it could be right, because when you deal with political shapeshifters, they can take on a different form based on a different situation, and they hide behind people. But we're not here to get into the machinations of whether the Illuminati exist or what exactly is the deep state. Let's talk about how, as somebody who is a conspiracy theorist and would sometimes listen to the same thing that reactionaries and fascists listen to, but I fancy myself taking it the right way towards altruism and humanism, and they take it towards just themselves. The problem with reactionaries and fascists, especially like Greek's Golden Path, is not necessarily what they say to justify what they're doing. They could actually be saying something true, and political correctness could be working against the people because they're mad that Hitler said that the sky was blue. You see, a lot of these reactionary groups, they do talk about the deep state and the Illuminati and the cabal, or something similar to that. That I want to stress upon you, that's not where they went south. They didn't go south because they admitted that there's a cabal, Illuminati of basically bankers and globalists that are trying to fuck us over, that they're talking about the deep state. Because for a long time, a lot of people who are left, right, in between, totally independent, have been saying that for a long time. Here's where the fascists went wrong, and the woke left and Twitterati and Hollywood do their own version of this, but the area where the fascists went wrong is that they realize is that a lot of fascists were the imperial middle class of an empire that just now started to go in decline. That a lot of fascists were people that benefited from the status quo and enjoyed a high state in life, relatively speaking, whenever their empire was thriving. But whenever their empire starts to go on the decline, because the Illuminati, the cabal, or whatever, they like to jump ship, and they like to jump from one host to another. They go from one country to another. They shift economic and political power from one capital to another. That's whenever the country that's in decline, they realize that they're being left behind by the globalists that they were in bed with. They're being dumped for a new trophy wife. They're being dropped for a new model. It's kind of like what in Star Wars, what Palpatine did to his apprentices. He would have an apprentice, and then he would let that apprentice get killed, or he would have him killed, and then he'd replace him with a newer model, so that the person who knew a lot of stuff about him was cut in half, or had their heads cut off, or whatever. Well, it kind of works like the Sith in Star Wars. The thing is that whenever you have these people who were in bed, whether they realized it or not, with the establishment, with the ruling class, the secret powers of this world, and their country was fortunate or unfortunate enough to be the seat of power, so their country was probably the empire at that time. And as I said, the ruling elites basically said, okay, we're tired of Germany, so we're going to leave Germany or we're going to leave Britain. They had their century. It's time to move on to another country and set up shop and let them have their century where they're the empire or they're the capital of the empire that suppresses everyone else. And each era has a continent. So, the age of Pisces, it's Europe. America's a transition. It's kind of like during the age of Taurus, Egypt was the transition between Taurus and Aries, and then Rome was the transition between Aries and Pisces, and America will be the transition between Pisces and Aquarius. If you don't have to take that literally, you can take that figuratively. But what we have here is why is fascism wrong? Well, fascism is especially dangerous to a conspiracy theorist like me because they will hook you in by saying a bunch of stuff that you believe in, and then they will totally sink you. They are wolves in sheep's clothing because they will talk about the ruling elites and the bankers and all that. So the thing is that fascists start talking about what's wrong, and you think, oh, so they realize that there's an aristocracy of people that are parasitic in nature, that are hiding behind the people's government, and that they are screwing everything up, and that we need to excise this parasite, so we should try to surgically punch up. But they do not. They start taking a strong U-turn and start punching down. And that's what's wrong with fascists. Fascists know that the globalists and Illuminati are up to something, and they're very savvy on conspiracy theories because they were just part of that. They were the globalists' last girlfriend. And they are a spurned lover, and they are upset because the globalists, the Satanists, the Illuminati, they were in bed with them, and then they got dumped. But hey, guess what? If they cheat with you, they cheat on you. So the thing is that at that time, they're controlled opposition, and if you watch documentaries on the Golden Path in Greece, and it's kind of sad that, fascism is on the rise in the birthplace of Western democracy. But if you watch that, it's like they talk about the ruling elites fucking everything up, but they have to know that they're infiltrated by the deep state because they've got so many politicians supporting them. So if that deep state of politicians are supporting you, then you're for the deep state. The same thing with communists. And I think the thing is that the deep state, the Illuminati, the cabal, they like to infiltrate all of their opposition with some kind of totalitarian statism. So they want you to believe that anybody who hates the corporations, who hates the oligarchy, who hates the, globalists and the bankers and all that, you're some kind of Nazi or communist. And that's really ironic because even though they like to hide behind democracy, these feudalists, these people who rule the world kind of like a hidden feudal aristocracy, and even though we think each country is independent, they're really just a fiefdom under a feudal oligarchy or aristocracy or whatever. The thing is that they really like to set it up by taking opposition and they turn it into some sort of totalitarianism, and it's like either you let us parasite you or you get stomped to death by people who were originally fighting us, but now they're going to be turned on you. And so with fascism, they turn around and they start brutally taking it out on immigrants and minorities and the vulnerable, who are by no means saint. Let's not be politically correct, but that's not the root cause of their suffering. So if they just take it out on immigrants and poor people and minorities who've been done wrong by the system like them, perhaps even more so, they're still being a bitch of that system. They're saying, look, Daddy, I'm a servant, and I'll kill the slaves just to prove how loyal I am to the master, just so that I can retain my position as favored servant and house inward. So that's basically what has happened to fascists. Fascist is what happens whenever you have the middle class majority develop a form of authoritarian socialism and take it out on the minorities. The minorities are swept away with communism, which basically is another form of authoritarian socialism that's basically meant to say, we know that the ruling elites are bad, but we're going to take it out, but we want to destroy the middle class, and if we destroy the middle class, we're okay with the same oligarchy being above us. So the thing is that what happens is that the oligarchy which is the eternal enemy of mankind, says, you know what, the American experiment is over. Democracy is over. It doesn't mean anything to us anymore. So what are you going to do? Well, we're going to set it up to where we can't have a middle class anymore. So we're going to have the middle class and the lower classes embrace a form of totalitarianism that's genocidal. And we're going to have them fight each other, and whoever's left over will rule over under a form of dictatorship or feudalism. So that's basically what they have. Or whoever's left over will come back and embrace the status quo, which is, I don't want to call it capitalist realism. I would probably call it more corporate socialist realism, but it's the issue is not right-wing or left-wing. The issue is not capitalist versus socialist. Those are means to an end. Those are vehicles. Those are uniforms. Those are tools that can be used for good or ill in anybody's hands depending on who you are. Something being capitalist or socialist is not make it the Jesus or the devil. So it's more about sometimes it's less the ingredients and more the combination. And sometimes it's less and sometimes what determines the combination is who the chef is. But I just wanted to say that as somebody who's a conspiracy theorist, I get horrifically traumatized from fascism, not because I am politically correct at all, but because fascism will take something that a libertarian conspiracy theorist will say. And I'm not full-on libertarian, but bear with me. That's something along the lines of a libertarian conspiracy theorist will say, and at the last minute we'll do a 180 pivot and start taking it out on the vulnerable instead of punching up. So they say all this good stuff, and then that last minute they direct all of their power and anger not up, but throwing a bunch of minorities under the bus. And in a roundabout way, communism kind of does the same. And that's what they're trying to do with America. They're trying to make it to where the only forms of government that you have is fascism or communism, or just go back to the status quo, that if you want to challenge the state or to challenge the powers behind the state, your only choice is to either be a fascist or a Marxist. So the thing is that they're basically saying you either let us rape you in your sleep, or you get trampled to death by one of these two crazy people that thought that they could fight us until we infiltrated them with our goons. That's the choices that we have. And that's why I've learned to be very wary of fascism, because the fascists themselves know they're being infiltrated by the deep state. And that's kind of how I feel what's wrong with boomers, too. I don't want to call all boomers reactionaries or fascists, because that's just annoying to say. But if there's something that I realize what's wrong with boomers, as a conspiracy theorist, I think boomers are in touch with the conspiracy theories that a lot of young people and leftists are too politically correct to believe, that they're too sensitive to believe. However, even though I think boomers know what it is, they're still part of the police state, and they still want to go back to something. They know that globalism is wrong, but they want to go back to nationalism and imperialism. And it's like, yo, boomers, reactionaries, globalism is wrong because nationalism is wrong, and it's just nationalism turned on its head. It's imperialism turned on its head. But they want to go back to the same evil that's custom made for them. The problem that I have with the previous generation that often has conspiracy theories that I believe, that I agree with, is that their take on it is they know the conspiracy theories because they were in bed with the monster. It's kind of like somebody who used to work for KFC and then he got fired, and then he vengefully starts telling like the secret herbs and spices to make KFC chicken, and he's hoping that KFC will take him back, but until then he's throwing a fit. That's kind of how it is. Boomers are more in touch with the machinations of the globalists and Illuminati, and for those boomers who are good people, God bless them. But part of it, maybe not as individuals but as a whole, is the fact that the reason why boomers are suddenly turning on capitalist realism now, and I hate using those loaded terms, that's an ideology, that's not actually a form of economics, but the reason why they're turning on the globalists and the corporations now is because the globalists and the corporations aren't favoring them. So that's why they're turning on them. And some of them will, join the whatever the resistance is. But some of them, it's like, if they could get back in the good graces of the ruling elites by throwing somebody else under the bus, some of them would do it in a heartbeat. And that's what we need to be afraid of.